Noah Gragson was spotted at Stewart-Haas Racing this past week and is expected to join Stewart-Haas Racing in 2024. And it sounds like Aric Almirola might be headed to Joe Gibbs Racing to drive at least on a part-time basis. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to your video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. Let's go ahead by starting to talk about some paint schemes that have been revealed for 2024. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chris Buescher's 2024 Fastenal scheme. I actually really like this paint scheme a lot. I think the black and the blue contrast really well together. I think the black number looks really awesome as well. In general, I think this paint scheme looks really solid and really good. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chase Sully's 2024 Napa scheme. This scheme looks really good in my opinion. I love the fact that there's more blue on the Napa scheme. We've wanted more blue on these Napa schemes for a very long time, and I'm glad they're bringing more blue. I've never been a big fan of the white contrast in the background for years. Glad there's going to be more blue on the Napa scheme. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brad Keselowski's 2024 Fastenal Bodyguard scheme. Not a fan of this scheme. The orange and the black do not work together at all in my opinion. The colors just mismatch in my opinion. They don't work very well. It's not that good of a paint scheme in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Champion Contender. As it was announced on Tuesday that Champion Contender will sponsor Daniel Dye for 12 races in 2024. Really good to see Championship Contender continue working with Daniel Dye. They work with Daniel Dye, I believe, at GMS Racing in 2023 and also when he drove in ARCA in 2022. Glad to see they're going to be sticking around and working with Daniel Dye once again in the 2024 NASCAR Truck Series season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Liberty University. As it was announced, I believe, on Wednesday that Liberty University will sponsor William Byron for 12 races in 2024. The first race they will sponsor, of course, will be the LA Coliseum. Liberty University has been a loyal sponsor of William Byron for the last few years, so it doesn't shock or doesn't surprise me to see that they are going to go ahead and continue working with William Byron at least for a little bit and stay working with them for 2024. Really exciting and really good stuff. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Advent Health. As it was announced, I believe, on Tuesday that Advent Health will sponsor Legacy Motor Club in 2024. Remember, we talked about this, I believe, on Tuesday that Advent Health had left Trackhouse Racing and Ross Chastain. They're going to sponsor Erik Jones for 6 races in 2024, including, I believe, in the Daytona 500. And also, they're going to sponsor Jimmie Johnson for 3 races, confirming that Jimmie Johnson will be back behind the wheel in 2024. Those 3 races that Jimmie are going to run are at Texas, Charlotte for the Coke 600, and Kansas Speedway for the Advent Health 400. Jimmie Johnson had a lot of success at those racetracks, so it's really awesome and cool to see that they're going to be working with him there. I know people have had some questions on what other races Jimmie could run. I would imagine Jimmie's going to run a lot more races than just the ones that we are talking about. Nonetheless, glad to see that Advent Health will be working with Legacy Motor Club in 2024. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sonoma Raceway. As they announced, I believe it was on Tuesday afternoon, that they will begin a repave at the start of 2024. This is something kind of been rumored that was likely going to happen. I think it was talked about in Corey LaJoie's podcast, and Bob Pockets reported on this as well. They were likely going to be repaving Sonoma Raceway, and now it's officially going to be happening in 2024. Really glad to see this happening, to be honest. Hopefully the racing can be better. The hope is to have it done in a couple months and then have the track ready for all the events that will end up taking place. Nonetheless, glad to see Sonoma Raceway is getting a repave for 2024. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brian Doza. As it was announced last night, reported by Colby Evans from ARCA Starting Park, that Brian Doza will be driving for FD1 Racing in 2024 once again, driving the number 28 truck. They'll run at Daytona National Speedway. FDNY Racing, I believe, has been around since the start of the NASCAR Truck Series back, I believe, in 1995. So it's really good to see that this team is going to be back and, once again, returning on the racetrack in 2024. Unclear how many races that they are going to run. I don't think that was indicated today, but it's still really cool to see that they're going to be back behind the wheel and back on the racetrack in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Meyer-Shank Racing. As yesterday afternoon, the numbers that they will have for 2024 have been revealed. So Helio Castroneves is going to have the 06 number, which he's used, I believe, in IndyCar the last year or two. Felix Rosenqvist will be basically going into Simon Pagenaud's ride and be driving the number 60 car. Of course, he's joining up. And Tom Blomqvist is going to drive the number 66 car in 2024. Honestly, really cool numbers in my opinion. Glad to see the 6.6 is back for the first time with Meyer-Shank Racing. Obviously, no surprise to see the Helios in the 06 and that Felix Rosenqvist is in the 60. Nonetheless, I think those are solid numbers overall, to be honest with you, for all three drivers. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about IndyCar. As I believe is reported by Marshall Perrett and multiple reporters in the IndyCar industry that they are going to postpone the debut of the hybrid system until after the Indy 500. There had been a rumor going around that they were likely going to basically kind of delay after St. Pete, maybe bring it into a little bit later in the season. But now, of course, it's confirmed that they're going to be delaying it for a little bit longer. This is really a shame to see. Obviously, this hybrid system has been something that's been rumored for quite a bit of time that was going to come into play because IndyCar has been testing a hybrid system, but obviously the tests haven't gone as well as I think they were hoping. So they're going to delay it till after the Indy 500. I personally would just wait till after the season is over and wait till they debut it until 2025. It'd be better to be safe than sorry, but we'll see what IndyCar decides to do. Nonetheless, at this particular point, they're going to hold off on releasing that until later in time. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NASCAR production facility. As it was reported by many reporters that NASCAR has unveiled a 58,000 square foot production facility next to the R&D Center. It was a $53 million investment, 3 studios, 8 control rooms, and 4 announcer booths. And one thing that was talked about is the fact that the Xfinity Series more than likely is going to be broadcasted here. I am personally not a fan of broadcasting races not at the racetrack. I think that's one of the biggest negatives. I'm really glad they developed a new production facility. A lot of these smaller and these bigger teams are going to be able to do this for like NASCAR interviews, among other things. But I'm not a big fan of the fact that you're going to have to go now and see the Xfinity Series broadcast live at not at the racetrack, but at a booth. In my opinion, I think it makes so much more sense to show up to the racetrack because I think you get that energy, excitement. We've been complaining about the Truck Series broadcast, which most of the broadcasts were not at the racetrack. They were at a studio. So I'm not a massive fan of this. I think this is an absolute negative in my opinion. The fact that they're not going to be at the racetrack. I think it's cool they have a production facility coming in, but I'm not a big fan, in my opinion, of them using that and using that for broadcast. I think that's just a massive negative and a turnoff for me, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the ARCA West and East Series as their 2024 schedules have been officially revealed. So let's go through the ARCA East schedule. The season's going to kick off at Five Flags Speedway on March 23rd, followed by Dover on April 26th. Then they'll go to Nashville on May 11th at the Fairgrounds. Then they're going to race at Flat Rock on May 18th, then Iowa on June 14th, then IRP on July 19th, Milwaukee on August 25th, and Bristol on September 19th. I believe all but 3 of those races are going to be on FS1 because of the ARCA combination races. Then for the West Series, they're going to have Phoenix on March 8th, then Irwindale on March 30th, then Kern County, which is now owned by Kevin Harvick, on April 20th, then Portland on May 31st, and Sonoma on June 7th. Then they'll race in Irwindale on July 4th, and Shasta Speedway on July 27th. After that, they'll race at Tri-City on August 10th. Then they'll go to Madera on September 21st. After that, they'll race at All-American on October 5th. Then Kern County once again on October 26th. And then they'll race at Phoenix Raceway on November 8th. The West schedule has a lot more races and more teams are probably going to show up. As for the ARCA East schedule, I wish there were more races, but apparently the ARCA Series is fine with the amount of races they have, which is a little bit disappointing to hear, but I guess they're fine with that. Nonetheless, those are the ARCA East and West schedules, and glad to see that those have been finally revealed for 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about McAnally-Hilgeman Racing. As it was reported by Joseph Swaley from Toby Christie's network, that McAnally-Hilgeman Racing is going to have an alliance with CR7 Motorsports in 2024, as what I believe the owner of that organization said on Series 7 NASCAR Radio. It's interesting to see. Obviously, a lot of rumors are circulating at this point that we're seeing a lot of movement happening in the Chevy camp. Obviously, we talk about McAnally-Hilgeman a little more here in just a little bit. But it's interesting to hear that they are going to have an alliance CR7. It's obviously rumored that we're going to see Grant Enfinger more than likely headed over to CR7 in 2024, but nothing is officially confirmed at this point. But it's really cool and awesome to see that at least we'll see two groups working together in the 2024 season, and it's going to be cool to have an alliance between McAnally-Hilgeman Racing and CR7 Motorsports. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Beard Motorsports. As it was reported, and actually they put a post out on their Twitter page after teasing their 2024 NASCAR plans. Beard Motorsports obviously now revealed their 2024 plans at this current moment, but it's also expected right now that they're more than likely going to run the Daytona 500 and probably all the Super Speedway races, though I could see them running more races in 2024, considering the fact they did have a more expanded schedule in the 2023 season, where they ran in Michigan, also I believe ran at the Charlotte Roval as well. I do believe they're going to show up. The question will be who will be the driver. Obviously, Austin Hill could be in the potential possibility of going into that seat, but nothing is confirmed at this point. I would love to see Parker Clearman get a chance and opportunity to drive for teams to get some more cup starts in the next-gen car, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. Nonetheless, glad to see that Beard Motorsports more than likely will once again be back and once again showing up in 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Faction 46. As this is a really, really cool announcement. So Aric Almirola put out a video talking about Faction 46 and was interviewed by the owner of this team. So they are going to be joining the Truck Series in 2024. And according to what Lane Moore said, who's the owner of the organization, in that interview, they are going to have a Nice alliance. Now, a lot of people are kind of wondering who the driver is going to be. Well, I think it's going to be this announcement will have something to do with the Richard Petty and Thad Moffitt announcement that is taking place. Remember, there's an announcement coming, I believe, on Saturday that Thad Moffitt and Richard Petty are having. If you've been paying attention to the tweets that have been going out, I believe that those tweets from Thad Moffitt have something to do with this Faction 46 announcement. So I believe that you will be seeing an announcement with Faction 46 once again with the driver. It's supposed to be announced later this week, which I think it's going to be announced, I believe, tomorrow. And I think Thad Moffitt is going to be the driver, and it will have an alliance with Richard Petty as well. It's really cool to see a new organization showing up to the Truck Series. A lot of people wonder if they're legitimate or not. I think they are a legit organization, a team. The fact they've got Richard Petty involved tells me they're a pretty legit organization. Nonetheless, it's really cool to see that we got a new organization joining the NASCAR Truck Series in 2024, and welcome Faction 46 to NASCAR. Really exciting and really awesome stuff overall, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jack Wood. As it was announced, I believe, on Tuesday that Jack Wood, or Wednesday, that Jack Wood will be joining McAnally-Hilgeman Racing in 2024. He's going to run full-time in the ARCA West Series, driving the number 16 Napa Auto Parts car, and is going to drive for 14 Truck Series races in the number 91 car truck in 2024. Jack Wood has competed full-time or part-time for the last couple of years in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series for teams like KBM and also GMS Racing. As for his chance to win the ARCA West Championship, I think he's got a really good opportunity shot to win that championship, at least, considering the fact that he's going to be one of the best cars in the field, and I think he'll have a really good chance to win the championship there. As for the Truck Series and the 91 truck coming back, it's really cool to see he's going to run some truck races as well. I'll be honest, I don't think he's going to do amazing, though McAnally-Hilgeman Racing is going to get a lot of the GMS stuff going into 2024, so I think that's going to help them a lot going into next season. That being said, I'm really excited to see Jack Wood getting another opportunity and shot. I think he'll, like I said, be a championship contender in ARCA West, but I don't know if he'll do amazing in trucks, but at least the 91 truck is returning, which I think overall is pretty good and pretty exciting stuff, to be honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Dawson Cram. As I believe it was announced on Wednesday that Dawson Cram will be joining JD Motorsports full-time in 2024, driving the number 4 car. Really awesome opportunity for Dawson Cram. I've never really been the biggest fan of Dawson Cram as a driver, but he's had some solid performances time and time again, and has had some really good practice runs and qualifying runs for teams like Mike Harmon Racing. I think it's a really good opportunity for Dawson Cram, though I will say JD Motorsports in general did struggle quite a bit throughout 2024-3. Let's just be perfectly honest. There were not a lot of good performances from this organization, and they, like I said, struggled throughout the 2023 season. But like I said, it's a really good opportunity for Dawson. I think to go for Dawson is try to make every single race, because JD Motorsports struggled a lot of races to make it on points, especially. They failed to qualify a lot of races with not just a 4-car, but I think they failed to qualify Brennan Poole throughout the season as well. Obviously, I think that Dawson is kind of replacing Brennan Poole going into 2024. Nonetheless, glad to see that Dawson Cram will be joining JD Motorsports in the 2024 NASCAR season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Trackhouse. As it was officially confirmed on Tuesday that Trackhouse has purchased one of the 11 grid slots in MotoGP and will be joining in 2024. Now, Trackhouse Racing, obviously, rumored they were going to be purchasing that R&B organization, I can't remember, RBF organization, but the RBF organization was forced to shut down due to that crypto sponsorship that they ended up happening. As for the drivers, I believe Miguel Oliveira and Juan Fernandez are going to be the drivers of this organization. But obviously, Trackhouse Racing, that's basically the Trackhouse Entertainment Group. They've been planning to make some expansion outside of NASCAR, expand to other forms of racing, which we'll get into here in just a little bit, on what else it could expand to in the not-so-distant future. But I think it's really awesome to see that Trackhouse Racing is, in fact, going to be expanding to MotoGP. I think it's going to be really a lot of fans may tune in to MotoGP and see how that team's going to perform. Honestly, they're kind of struggled, I think, this year in MotoGP in 2023, so I don't think they're immediately going to be successful with this purchase and acquisition, but I think that they are going to be a lot better than I think people give them credit for in 2024. Nonetheless, I think it's really awesome and great to see that Trackhouse Racing is expanding to other forms of racing and will be expanding to another form in the 2024 season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Spire Motorsports. As Spire Motorsports has officially revealed their crew chiefs for the 2 new drivers coming in 2024. So for Zane Smith, he is going to be working with Steven Duran, and for Carson Osbar, he is going to be working with Luke Lambert. Let's start off with Carson Osbar and Luke Lambert. Luke Lambert actually worked with Carson Osbar at Legacy Motor Club at the end of the year when Carson ran a majority of the final 15 races of the season, and I think they gelled very well together. Also, Luke Lambert is extremely experienced. Luke Lambert, while he's a younger crew chief in the garage, Luke Lambert's been in the NASCAR Cup Series since 2011 or 2012. So having someone who has that veteran presence who will call Carson out on making mistakes on the track, I think that is really going to help Carson out, and I think this pairing is going to gel very well together. As for Steven Duran was Kevin Harvick's former engineer and was Kevin Harvick's engineer when he won the 2004 car chief, I should say, when he won the 2014 NASCAR Cup Series championship. I believe that these two are going to gel very well together. I think this is something to do with Trackhouse as well, really helping out. So I think this is going to be really solid pairings going to 2024, and I'm glad to see that both Zane Smith and Carson Osbar now have crew chiefs. I thought maybe Darian Grubb would come over, but I think Darian Grubb is going to probably be working with Shane Van Gisbergen next season. But I think it's really awesome and good to see that Steven Duran and Luke Lambert will be working with Zane Smith and Carson Osbar in the 2024 season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Anthony Alfredo. As it was announced yesterday that Anthony Alfredo will be joining Our Motorsports, or returning to Our Motorsports in 2024, driving the number 5 car. Anthony Alfredo had competed full-time for BJ McLeod Motorsports in 2023, but unfortunately, Anthony Alfredo did not make the playoffs and unfortunately was let go at the end of the 2023 season. So that's why Anthony Alfredo is going back to Our Motorsports. Now, Anthony Alfredo drove full-time for this organization in 2022, and honestly, Anthony Alfredo did okay with this organization, was not the most competitive. Obviously, Our Motorsports in recent years has downsized, so a big question going around is, will Our Motorsports potentially go back to expanding to a 2 or 3 car organization, or are they going to say a 1 car organization in 2024? Well, I think with Dude Wipes coming in and sponsoring, they could use that money to try to fund a second car, that 0-2 car, and maybe Blaine Perkins comes back, but nothing's been kind of confirmed at this point. But I am really happy to see Anthony Alfredo is going to be back behind the wheel and racing with Our Motorsports in 2024. I think this is really exciting and really good to see overall for this organization. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Tyler Ankrum. As it was announced yesterday that Tyler Ankrum will be joining McAnally Hilgeman Racing in 2024, driving the number 18 truck. Liuena is going to sponsor, I believe, for 21 of the 22 races in 2024. And also, Mark Hillman is going to be the crew chief. Let's talk about this for a second. To be honest, I did not see this coming. I really thought Tyler Ankrum was going to be back at Ettore Racing in the 2024 season. But with this coming out, this definitely is a massive shock for sure. But I do think this may be an upgrade for Tyler Ankrum going into 2024. Ettore Racing has kind of struggled the last couple years since they've lost Austin Hill and brought Tyler Ankrum in. But really since 2019, Tyler Ankrum's been kind of a massive unknown. He's kind of struggled the last 2 years, hasn't really formed the greatest, struggled in 2020, struggled in 2021, and has struggled the last couple years, though he did almost make the playoffs in both the years with Ettore in 2022 and 2023. It's kind of a shock to me that he's going to be not back at that organization next year, considering he's had a lot of success with that team. But it's really good to see he's getting a shot and opportunity in another organization. I really hope that they do go ahead and get better performance. This is a really massive move for McAnally to expand to 4 trucks next year. It's cool to see the 18 truck back as well, though it's not the real 18 truck in my opinion. But it's really cool to see that McAnally is expanding, and I'm really happy to see that Tyler Ankrum is getting a shot and opportunity to drive for an organization like McAnally in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the next-gen tests at Phoenix. Now, earlier this week on Tuesday and Wednesday, NASCAR was having their next-gen tests at Phoenix. Now, the original plan was they were going to test a new transaxle for shifting purposes. However, NASCAR decided to go away from that halfway through the test, and they decided to stop doing the test on the transaxle to get rid of shifting, and they basically tested mufflers throughout the day. Now, they tested some new tire combinations, and they've also tested some new aero components as well, and like I said, trying to remove shifting. But one thing that's been talked about and rumored is that NASCAR may or may not go ahead and ban shifting and make black flag people, which I think is a terrible decision. Now, multiple drivers were talked about this. We had interviews with guys like Erik Jones, Ryan Blaney, and also even Kyle Larson as well. Ryan Blaney said he actually thought with the new splitter that came in, he thought that there's definitely a massive difference and was a big fan of that. Erik Jones, he went on to basically say that he was a big fan of the tire combination. He said that tires were definitely the biggest difference. One thing I didn't mention, though, is that they actually tested, like I said, the mufflers they use at the LA Coliseum and the Chicago Street Courts. And Kyle Larson said that NASCAR should make the cars a little bit quieter in the video that he ended up releasing. They was interviewed by Cole Cusimano, who's one of the few reporters, so shout out to him for being at that test to get a lot of these storylines so we hear some of the stuff. As in regards to the test, I felt like it was a big waste of time. I understand the mufflers are very important, but if you weren't testing to get rid of shifting, then what's the point of having this test? You wasted the team's time, you wasted their money, and he should have not gone out to Phoenix to do this test. I get testing is important to try to make the racing product better, but in my personal and honest opinion, I'm just not a fan of wasting these teams' times and going and testing. We'll see what NASCAR decides to do with the rest of this stuff, but at least we got the test over. As for Kyle Larson saying the cars should be quieter, I don't 100% agree with him on that, but I think a lot of people need to pump the brakes. They were just testing the cooling. I don't think NASCAR right now is going to implement that at other tracks throughout the season. So nonetheless, it's interesting to hear about the test. Again, mufflers, among other things, there's probably more that will come out as time goes on. If NASCAR wants to implement some of these stuff, they may end up doing that here in the near future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Trackhouse Racing once again. Now, during that announcement when it comes to MotoGP and Trackhouse going to MotoGP, Justin Marks is asked about maybe in the future running the Indy 500. And Justin Marks, according to Adam Stern, says that Trackhouse could enter the Indy 500 as soon as it finds a compelling opportunity. And he continued on by saying that if he's going to do it, it will likely be with one of his drivers. It has to be a really good opportunity. It's no secret that Justin Marks does want to run the Indy 500. I think he talked about this last year in 2023 when he, of course, went to the Indy 500 and spoke to Marshall Pruitt from Racer.com at the Indy 500 either last year or 2023. He said he's got interest in maybe wanting to run the Indy 500. Now, what drivers could he use? Well, obviously, you got to look at drivers like Ross Chastain and Daniel Swartz, two of the easier ones. They both currently drive for Trackhouse Racing. They would be two drivers that would be no-brainers. But you've also got one driver I think would be one of the easier ones, and that is Shane Van Gisbergen. Shane Van Gisbergen and why his schedule has not been revealed for 2024 at this current moment. He is someone that I think is extremely talented. and can do really good. And I think if you put him in different forms of racing, I think he'd be able to succeed. So I could definitely see SVG getting a chance to run the Indy 500. But the other driver who may get a chance and opportunity I'd love to see is Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch has kind of, I think, worked with Trackhouse in the past. Obviously, Spire and Trackhouse will be working together in the Xfinity Series, or Cup Series, I should say. And obviously, we know Spire's purchased KVM. So maybe Justin Marks could go back and talk to Kyle Busch about wanting to run the Indy 500. Obviously, Kyle Busch is wanting to run the Indy 500. So I think it'd be really cool to see a driver like Kyle Busch get a chance and opportunity to maybe, just maybe, run the Indianapolis 500. Nonetheless, I'm really glad to see that Trackhouse Racing is looking to expand to other forms of racing, go and do other things, and I love the fact that they're looking to run into other forms of racing in the not-so-distant future. Maybe they're going to run the Indy 500, and I kind of hope they end up working with Kyle Busch in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Joey Logano. Now, Joey Logano obviously has a show that he does. I think it's called The Late Shift or something like that with Joey Logano. And Joey Logano brought a very spicy and interesting quote on his show. He basically called the NASCAR fans spoiled and talked about how the fact that NASCAR fans have more access than traditional sports like baseball, the NFL, the NHL, among other sports. Joey Logano, in my opinion, is absolutely incorrect with this statement. Look, do we have more access as NASCAR fans when it compared to like other sports like baseball, the NFL, NHL, all those sports? Yes, absolutely. But Joey Logano should have gone and looked at other motorsports. NASCAR, in my opinion, has the second least amount of access. Then the most least amount of access, of course, is Formula One. But I think NASCAR has the second least amount of access. In fact, you have to spend a lot of money to get access to these drivers. You have to either be in the media, you have to either know someone in the industry to get a pass, or you have to purchase a VIP pass. And I believe that the limit on those VIP passes has only gone down to 4 in recent years. So Joey Logano, and you're spending money too, right? You're going to be spending a lot more money. I think Joey Logano doesn't 100% get it. And Carson Osborne kind of said this as well. It's like Carson Osborne disagreed with Logano in the comment section. Can't remember exactly what he said, but he disagreed with what Joey Logano said about the fan access. And I think NASCAR fans are not spoiled, in my opinion. I think that in fact, there's less access. Years ago, absolutely, NASCAR fans had a lot more access, but you're charging them a lot more money, and it's becoming a lot more exclusive. So I don't really agree with Joey Logano on this, and I think the fact that Joey Logano called fans spoiled, I think is completely inaccurate and just completely false in my opinion. I don't like people being called spoiled that are not spoiled. I think it's a bad decision to do that, and in my opinion, I don't like the fact that Joey Logano called the race fans spoiled when they're the ones spending money and paying you guys to go to the racetrack, and you're spending a lot of money on these VIP access. Look at IMSA. IMSA, you basically can get a pass for the Rolex 24. You go to the infield and all that stuff for like $70 altogether to have everything, which I think is a really, really good deal to get all the access. NHRA, basically a ticket, is a pit pass. You actually can go on pit road if you have a grand and general admission ticket. So Joey Logano, I think, is wrong, and I don't agree with him, but that is just my honest opinion when it comes to that. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the charter agreement. Now, Adam Stern was on the most recent live stream from the Money Lap that Parker Clearman and Landon Castle do. According to Adam Stern, teams are saying that potentially are saying that if a deal is not done by Daytona, that stunts could be potentially pulled. What could these stunts be? Well, I think it's really interesting kind of talking about when it comes and we're talking about stunts. One of the things I think about when it comes to potential stunts that these teams could pull is maybe pulling off the racetrack and doing what they did at the U.S. Grand Prix in 2005. Where all but 3 of the organizations during the tire debacle pulled off the racetrack, and only 3 of the organizations started the race, and many fans were frustrated and upset. But personally, if these teams were to pull some sort of stunt on the racetrack, I think that would be a bad and negative reputation for the sport. Now, what exactly is going on with the charter agreement, and why are we having issues with it? Well, it comes down to one thing. The teams want a permanent charters. These teams have spent a lot of money on these charters. Remember, Litfast Motorsports sold their charter to Spire Motorsports / Trackhouse Racing for $40 million. So they spent a lot of money on these charters. So the teams want these charters to become permanent with the new revenue streams that's going to be coming in. Remember, the teams are expected to get more money on this TV deal. NASCAR, on the other hand, and really it's Jim France, is against making the charter system permanent. They want basically it to not be gone per se, but they're wanting the charter system to stick around. If you want my personal opinion on the charter agreement, I'm not the biggest fan of the charter agreement, but with how much money that's going into play for these teams, you can't just wash up the charter agreement because these teams at least have now a fallback when it comes to the charters. I really hope the agreement can get done sooner rather than later because I think that's something that's been kind of hurting NASCAR is this charter agreement. If we have certain stunts that start getting pulled and we start seeing displeasure, I think it's going to hurt the sport. Do I think a charter agreement is going to get done? I actually think more than likely it will get done. I just feel like there's a lot of things holding it up. NASCAR suggested if they do bring in permanent charters that a cost cap could come into play, which I think that'd be a very interesting thing to kind of see play out. Nonetheless, I think it's interesting. There's a lot of talk about a charter agreement, maybe potential teams making some moves, doing some things. Personally, I hope the situation gets resolved and this charter agreement can get finalized in the near future so we can get this stuff going. So nonetheless, a charter agreement hopefully will be finalized soon, but right now there's a lot of discourse and a lot of action in regards to a lot of disagreements in the sport in regards to the charter deal. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tony Stewart. As it was announced yesterday that Leah Pruitt, who's been driving for Tony Stewart Racing, is going to be stepping down to raise a family with Tony. In her place, Tony Stewart is going to take over, I believe, her car in the NHRA in 2024. So he'll be going to Top Fuel in 2024. First of all, huge congratulations to Tony on finally being able to raise the family. Hope that process can go through. But it's really awesome and cool to see that Tony Stewart is going to be expanding his horizons. He's obviously competing in the NHRA all season long. Drove in the Top Fuel Series, basically the Top Alcohol Series, which is the secondary series, and was able to win a couple races in the Mick Phillips organization. But now he's going to be going to the top of the top and trying to win the NHRA Funny Car Championship. I really believe that Tony Stewart will be pretty competitive in 2024. Obviously, it's really, you've got John Forrest in his 70s now, and he's competing full-time. He's still going out there, winning races, and still competing for championships. But it's really cool to see that Tony's going to be driving for his own organization in the 2024 NHRA season. I think Tony is going to be pretty competitive. I think Matt Hagan and other people from the Forrest family are going to be really his biggest competition in 2024 in the NHRA. But this is a massive bombshell and a massive, massive announcement. And now Tony Stewart was kind of asked about what does it take between raising a family? What's going to be scarier, him driving in a top fuel car or him raising a family? I think probably the more scary thing is probably raising a family at this point, considering Tony Stewart's age. Tony Stewart is 52, he'll be 53 in 2024, so he's definitely much older. That being said, I think, again, it's really phenomenal and amazing to see that Tony Stewart is going to be getting into the Top Fuel Series in the 2024 season. I'm really excited about this. I'm glad to see that Tony Stewart is going to be getting in the top series of NHRA, and I might tune into more NHRA races because Tony Stewart is going to be in Top Fuel in the 2024 NHRA season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Matt DiBenedetto. Now, we have talked Matt DiBenedetto a lot on this channel, and a big reason is because Matt DiBenedetto has not announced his 2024 plans currently at the moment. And someone, I think it was Josh Cochran on Twitter, had asked Bob Pockers about what is going on with Matt DiBenedetto. Does he have anything to announce? Well, Bob Pockers mentions that Matt DiBenedetto does not have any, is still looking for sponsors for 2024 and does not have a right at this point to announce for 2024. Obviously, you know Matt DiBenedetto will not be returning to Rackley War Racing in the 2024 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series season. And like I said, he's still looking for a ride going into 2024. Here's the thing about Matt DiBenedetto. I think Matt DiBenedetto absolutely deserves a shot to race in NASCAR. I think he's definitely a very, very talented driver. The big question right now, it comes down to, are teams going to be willing to work with him? Because the big question around Matt DiBenedetto is the fact that from what people have said, he's really hard to work with. You go back to his time working with the Wood brothers, so things have been going well, but he had kind of been bashing the crew chief on Sirius XM back then with Greg Irwin. And then, of course, he kind of had some issues with, I think, Go Fast Racing, had a bad ending with Levine, and also had a pretty bad ending with Rackley War Racing. The big question now is, where is he going to end up? Well, I do have some interesting predictions or places he could go. You've got Spire Motorsports in the Truck Series. That 38 truck has still not announced what they're doing for 2024, though Brett Moffitt's the current favorite, so I could see him going there. I could see him going to College Racing in the Cup or the Xfinity Series, maybe that 16 Cup car. We'll talk about why that's a possibility, but I don't think it's highly likely at this point. I would have to maybe say that maybe their Xfinity program, the 10 car, could be an option, but I don't know if that's going to be available. Maybe the second AM Racing car, that certainly could be a possibility. Brett Moffitt, like I said, I think will be back to the Truck Series in 2024, so maybe we see Matt DiBenedetto go to AM Racing full-time. There's other organizations like Joe Gibbs Racing that has not announced their intentions for 2024, though we do know at this point more than likely Sheldon Creed and Chandler Smith are more than likely going there full-time. It just has not been announced at this moment. Nonetheless, I'm really excited to see what happens, or really intrigued to see what happens to Matt DiBenedetto, because like I said, I really would want someone who can bring talent. And I think Matt DiBenedetto is a top-tier driver in this sport. Again, he did really solid with the Royal Brothers a few years ago, got the best out of equipment there, got them to the playoffs in 2020. And let's also not forget the fact that Matt DiBenedetto, for God's sakes, made the playoffs with Rackley this year in 2023 and won a race with them, though a lot of people are going to say it's controversial. He made the playoffs with Rackley this year. So he's definitely a very talented driver. It's just that the stuff that's happened behind the scenes has affected Matt DiBenedetto's career. So we'll see what happens in regards to Matt DiBenedetto and where he ends up going. But again, the rides are filling up really, really quickly. There's not a lot of top-tier rides that are remaining at this point. And in general, if he's going to be racing in Xfinity or any series next year, he might have to settle for a mid-tier ride and not a top-tier ride. We'll see what happens going into 2024, where he ends up going for the 2024 season. Nonetheless, so I think Matt DiBenedetto will be still looking and searching for rides for 2024. We'll, in fact, see where he ends up going in the 2024 NASCAR Truck Series or any series. I think he's either going to be in Trucks or Xfinity. I don't think he'll be in the Cup Series in the 2024 season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about AJ Allmendinger. Now, I did a video talking about this yesterday on the channel, but AJ Allmendinger has finally confirmed his 2024 plans. AJ Allmendinger is going to be returning to the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2024, driving the number 16 car for College Racing on a full-time basis. Obviously, we know that Chandler Smith is not returning to the number 16 Xfinity Series car, so that 16 car was going to be available, which doesn't surprise or shock a lot of people. But what's also confirmed is that AJ Allmendinger is at least going to run part-time in the Cup Series in 2024. Now, that number has not been officially disclosed. He could run the 13 car. They did run that 13 part-time car in the 2024 season. However, there is a lot of talk that 16 car, there's a lot of rumors. A lot of people thought maybe Ty Dillon was going to go full-time with the organization, but a lot of rumblings are circulating that number 16 car is going to be a part-time entry, well, a full-time car with multiple different drivers. So AJ Allmendinger and maybe Josh Williams and maybe other drivers could split that ride in 2024. As for AJ Allmendinger, I really wish he was going to be staying in the Cup Series on a full-time basis in 2024. I think AJ is an extremely talented driver and can get the best out of equipment. But again, the biggest reason why AJ was not able to stay full-time in Cup this year is due to sponsorship woes. AJ Allmendinger, compared to other drivers, doesn't bring the biggest sponsorship and funding. So that's the biggest reason why he's not in the Cup full-time. But at least we're going to see him part-time. I would imagine when it comes to his Cup Series schedule, he's probably going to run all the road courses in 2024, including the Chicago Street Course. He'll probably run Homestead Miami Speedway, considering he's historically really good at that track. Maybe Bristol as well. Maybe Martinsville. He's been pretty good at Martinsville historically, even though he did struggle here earlier in the year. But it really does give me great concern for their Cup Series program for calling. Obviously, you got Dan Hemrick who's going full-time, but at least for the Xfinity Series side of things, there's at least some hope. Because Josh Williams, I think, is a very talented driver and is kind of underrated. And I think with him going over there, I think Josh, with some help from AJ, I think he's going to do overall a pretty good job in 2024. Now, what are my expectations for AJ Allmendinger going into the 2024 season? I think AJ Allmendinger is going to contend for the playoffs. In fact, I think he's going to be one of the favorites for the championship. I think he's going to run around 4 to 5 Xfinity Series races potentially, and I think he does make the championship 4 in 2024. With his experience, how many road courses are on the schedule, I know Call kind of struggled on the road courses this year, but now they've got someone going back there full time. I think this is not only going to help AJ out and the organization out in general, but I think it's also going to help that out. Now, a lot of people are asking about the 10 car in Xfinity at this point as well. I would expect that car is going to be an all-star car in 2024. I think you have to look at drivers like Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch potentially driving that car at some point. I think Shane Van Gisbergen, who has not announced his intentions for 2024, is going to be back there as well. But it continues a lot of movement for the Xfinity Series. You've got Haley Deegan moving up to the AM with AM Racing in Xfinity next year. You've got Muniz, who's heavily rumored to go into Xfinity. You've got Sammy Smith and Chandler Smith moving in different positions next year over to their organizations. Sheldon Creed going to JGR. You've obviously got, of course, Jesse Love going to RCR. There's a lot of movement happening in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in general. I am very excited to see that AJ Allmendinger is back in Xfinity. Well, I'm not excited. I wish he was still in Cup. But I think for the Xfinity Series, it's going to get more exciting. I think that he will never be back full-time in Cup because AJ's age, unfortunately. I think AJ will be 43 next year. So AJ's probably getting closer and closer to the end of his competitive NASCAR career. But I think it's going to be fun to see him get out there. And maybe, just maybe, AJ Allmendinger may get his first ever NASCAR Xfinity Series title. We could all dream at some point, right, that maybe he gets it done. Nonetheless, though, it's exciting to see that AJ Allmendinger will be returning to the NASCAR Xfinity Series on a full-time basis in 2024 in the number 16 car. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Aric Almirola. Now, I talked about Aric Almirola on the channel earlier in the week, but I really get a lot more in-depth on that. So, over the weekend on Sunday, there was a lot of talk about Aric Almirola and the potential of him joining Joe Gibbs Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2024 on a part-time basis. Now, Joe Gibbs, they were at the game, the Commanders game that happened. Aric Almirola is being introduced, I think, to the new owner of the organization with Harris Blitzer Group that's coming into play with the Commanders. And Joe Gibbs publicly said that Aric Almirola, he is driving for us now. The fact that Aric Almirola would be returning to Joe Gibbs Racing next year is very interesting. Now, what is Aric Almirola's number potentially going to be in 2024? My best guess for Aric Almirola is that his number next year is going to be the number 19 car. We'll talk about that in a second, but if you know the history of Aric Almirola, he actually was a former Joe Gibbs Racing driver. Aric Almirola actually was in the development system, actually made his NASCAR Cup Series debut in the number 80 JGR car, which was an R&D car. Trackhouse did not invent that, by the way. But Aric Almirola drove for them on a part-time basis, actually almost full-time, and drove the 20 car in many races and had some pretty competitive runs in that number 20 car. Now, remember what happened is that Aric Almirola was in that 20 car at Milwaukee. However, Rockwell Automations really wanted Aric Almirola out of the car to put Denny Hamlin behind the wheel because Rockwell paid to see Denny Hamlin behind the wheel of that car. And they kicked Aric Almirola out while he was leading the race. And Denny Hamlin was able to go on to win, but that win was credited to Aric Almirola. And pretty much right after that race happened, Aric Almirola left the organization and went over to DEI when Ginn was purchased by Dale Earnhardt Incorporated, when Dale Earnhardt Jr. was basically leaving the organization at the end of that season. As Aric Almirola getting an opportunity to go with JGR, I think it's really, really exciting. Aric Almirola, a lot of people were kind of confused saying, we all thought Aric Almirola was retiring. Yeah, Aric Almirola was retiring from full-time racing. He never announced that he was going to be going and retiring altogether. He would love to race in Xfinity and trucks. There was talk of maybe him going to Junior Motorsports, but the fact that he's likely headed over to Joe Gibbs Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, I think is really good for the sport in general that he is going to be sticking around. Now, sponsorship has not been unveiled, and announcement really hasn't happened at this point, but the fact that Aric Almirola will be headed back, I think he's going to be pretty competitive, and I think Aric Almirola will get a win or two, and maybe get a win in Xfinity Series next year, especially with the fact he's likely headed there. I think Aric Almirola will be very, very competitive, and nonetheless, I think he'll have a very solid and really good year with this team next year. Once you do get official final announcement on the word, that probably will get announced here really soon. As for the rest of Joe Gibbs Racing, it's expected that Chandler Smith and Sheldon Creed are going to be full-time. I think Sheldon will be in the 18 or the 20, and Chandler Smith will likely be in the 20 or 18. I think Chandler will probably be more than likely in the 20, considering the fact that that 20 car has been the flagship car the last year, and I think he's going to be the flagship driver. I think Chandler's going to be extremely competitive next year, and I think he'll be a championship contender. As for Sheldon Creed, I think Sheldon will have his best year in Xfinity next year, and I think he's going to be really good to have like Aric Almirola over there to kind of be a mentor to both young drivers. Aric Almirola is someone who, it kind of can be someone who's going to be a mentor. He had been rumored maybe to be a driver coach for Ford, but I think it's really good that Aric Almirola is going to be sticking out of his comfort zone, getting out of the Ford system for the first time in many, many years, and going back to the Chevy side, of going back to Toyota for the first time in his career, because Aric Almirola has been with Chevy and Ford, but has never worked with Toyota. So seeing Aric Almirola likely headed back to Joe Gibbs Racing and going there, I think is really, really exciting and really good stuff. I don't know when an announcement is happening. I know JGR is supposed to announce this up before we get to Christmas break. There have been talk maybe it could come this week, but I'm not entirely sure when that announcement is happening. If that announcement was happening today, there'll probably be a second video on the channel talking about that, but still, it sounds like Aric Almirola may, in fact, be headed to Joe Gibbs Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series next year, and honestly, I really do hope and pray that it does, in fact, end up happening. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Noah Gragson. Now, there's been a lot of talk and conversation about Noah Gragson potentially heading to Stewart-Haas Racing in 2024. And there's been a lot of doubt for a lot of people because the announcement has not happened yet that he's going to be going there. Well, I think we got official confirmation that he's officially headed to Stewart-Haas Racing in 2024. Avery Willings put up an image on his Twitter page, and also I believe it was posted on Reddit as well. I can't remember the Reddit user who posted it, but it was spotted that Noah Gragson was spotted at Stewart-Haas Racing shop talking to Drew Blickensurfer, the crew chief of the number 10 car. So I think this pretty much does confirm that Noah Gragson will be headed to Stewart-Haas Racing in the 2024 season. Now look, Noah Gragson, one of the reasons why he's more than likely going to Stewart-Haas Racing in 2024, a big reason is because of money. He has a lot of money. Well, not as much as other drivers, but he brings in quite a bit of funding. Noah Gragson is expected to still be working with Black Rifle Coffee, which has been a loyal sponsor of Noah Gragson since the 2019 season when he joined Junior Motorsports. And also, I believe Bass Pro Shops is going to sponsor Noah Gragson throughout the season as well. Look, Noah Gragson brings that funding. That's a big reason why he's getting this opportunity and shot. As for Noah Gragson, I do think he's a pretty talented driver. Again, he's a good driver. He ran really good in the Xfinity Series last year in 2022, won 9 races, and was able to make it to the Championship 4. But let's be honest, in 2023, Noah Gragson had a very tumultuous season. Noah Gragson completely struggled in 2023, only scoring 2 top 20 finishes throughout the season. And Noah Gragson then, of course, went to pennies after getting suspended for some time. I've always said this about Noah Gragson. I've been a fan of his. Again, I think Noah Gragson got maybe NASCAR completely overreacted to the way. If the team wanted to fire him, that's their decision. There are things in the company. You've got to be smart with how to handle yourself. But Noah Gragson has said publicly, and he kind of had an interview in an article with Matt Weaver that came out recently that said he's been working on it, has a sports psychologist that's really helped him out, which I think is really good to see. He's saying all the right things and moving in the right pieces. Now, what are my expectations for Noah Gragson going into 2024? Well, honestly, with Noah Gragson going to SHR, I think Noah Gragson is going to struggle just a little bit. And I'm not really putting blame on Noah Gragson for that. My blame goes to Stewart-Haas Racing. Look, Stewart-Haas Racing, we all know, has been extremely struggling over the course of the last few years. They have not adapted very well to the next-gen car. They had an okay year in 2022 where Kevin Harvick got 2 victories, but no one won in 2023. Only one of the 2 SHR cars made the playoffs. The only other one that had a chance at times is Chase Briscoe. And Chase Briscoe got a massive penalty throughout the year. And they made a lot of personnel changes that really haven't worked or gelled well together at all for the organization. So I think Noah Gragson, unfortunately, is going to finish around 30th in points. I think he does get a couple top 10s throughout the year. I think he'll get some top 10s. But I don't really expect Noah Gragson to set the world on fire in 2024. I just think there's a lot of struggles coming away for this number 10 organization. I think that all comes down to Stewart-Haas Racing themselves. The organization really has not been that fast. They've been struggling in general, and I just don't think it's going to be a good year for Stewart-Haas Racing. They've lost Steven Durant as an engineer, which is Kevin Harvick's former engineer. You've also, of course, lost, Tim Fedewa, not working with Josh Berry next year. And they've also lost Kevin Harvick. They lost their leader. And I think the veteran leader is going to be Chase Briscoe. And Chase Briscoe's only been there for 3 years. You look at the organization, you got a lot of drivers kind of like that blue-collar side of things. But like I said, Noah Gragson, it's going to be good to see him at least running in the Cup Series more than likely next year. And I do believe he'll be pretty solid and pretty competitive throughout 2024. But I think there's some struggles coming away because SHR, like I've already mentioned and said, they have not been that fast as of recently. So we'll see how Noah Gragson does. But it looks like Noah Gragson is for sure headed to Stewart-Haas Racing, especially with him spotted at the SHR shop. So, that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and support on Patreon as well. Links description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's video. How well do you think Noah Gragson will do at SHR? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And how do you think Aric Almirola will likely do at JGR? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, we'll have a basically ranking every single track for 2024, how the facilities and all that kind of stuff. Sunday, there's going to be NASCAR Xfinity Series predictions. Monday, I'm not sure what will be coming out. We'll have to wait and see. Tuesday, there more than likely will be a NASCAR news video catching up on news over the weekend, and there will be other stuff dropping as we get closer to Christmas time. Got a lot of great content dropping on the channel, and I cannot wait for you guys to check it out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.